Colt Barber, one of the partners of Sic'Em365.com, but also constantly feeding information on the premium section of Sic'Em365.com. He's joined our show as well. So, Colt, the note with T.J. Franklin, which I wasn't surprised he was coming back. Obviously, Baylor's trying to keep as many as they can along that front line because some have decisions. But let's discuss T.J. Franklin and him coming back first and how important that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's massive. And you want to always look at production and you want to look at how talented a player is and his NFL potential. But I think something that Dave Aranda's put so much emphasis on, especially this offseason, is finding leadership. Because not that they didn't have it last year, but I think there were so many times and instances where it showed up. And we've seen some interesting moves this offseason with some of the starters that you would expect to come back given the chance. And they did not return. They hit the portal. And you see a guy like T.J. Franklin who has a spot and is going to return for a fifth year that went through the COVID season in 2020 and has that year back. And I think that you have to look at that as one, you're going to get a really talented player, but two, you're going to get a very experienced veteran, but also a leader. And I think you're going to need that on the defense. You lost Dylan Doyle, obviously specifically, and some other guys as well, but they need to find that leadership on the defensive side of the ball, especially when you're turning the page to a younger defensive coordinator. And not that Coach Palish doesn't have a pedigree of experience and leadership ability, but player-led teams are your best teams. And I think Dave Aranda spoke to that, and they're going to try to find it and put that piece of the puzzle together any way they can. And TJ is a huge part of that.
Colt, who would you say of the players that they've lost into the portal is the one that stings the most?
I mean, the two to me, and interestingly enough, I don't know if it was their decisions, but Micah Matsua and Orlando Johnson, and two guys that started a lot. They were still young. They still had a lot of football to play, and one of them ends up at Florida, and the other one ends up at Arkansas because they needed those programs needed guys that could come in and start right away. And we know the ability of those programs and how high of a level they can recruit. And for both those guys to be gone are big holes. But I think at the same time, go back to that leadership deal. And I'm not saying that they could have kept either one of those guys for sure had they pushed for it, but at times you want maturity and you want leadership. And as good as talented as those guys could be, maybe they didn't have the leadership qualities. Maybe they had some issues that we were never aware of. And I just, in this day and age with NIL and all that type of stuff, like transfer portal makes it so easy for guys to leave. And if they're willing to go that way, I think it's telling to both sides of the story. And those two guys specifically are going to be big holes to replace. Obviously, they're starters, but just very talented as well.
Colt, how much has the commitment of Sawyer Robertson provided some much-needed energy in addition to what it provided just simply depth-wise for that quarterback room, competition-wise for that quarterback room? It was obviously massive, but did you foresee the staff being able to handle the signing day debacle with Novosad as well as they did in Landon Robertson?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you want a guy like Austin Novosad to get on campus, but to land someone like Sawyer Robertson is, I mean, one, he's also obviously a high-rated guy as well out of high school, but he was developed by Mike Leach for 2 years, and you're not starting with a blank slate. You have a guy with a lot of knowledge, a lot of talent, but a lot of knowledge from the system that he learned and who he was coached by. And rest in peace, Mike Leach. But that's an awesome addition to this roster. And I think the most important thing to remember about that ad is that I guarantee that Blake Shapen said, bring in the most talented players that you can. And you want guys that want to compete. And Blake Shapen saw what happened with Gary Bohannon, and he took that job from Gary Bohannon after the spring. So you know good and well that he expects to compete for that job this spring with Sawyer Robertson. And, I don't think they necessarily say, oh, yeah, you're going to come in and be the starter. You can't sell a guy on a program in that way, especially the way Dave Aranda runs this. But, you're looking at a guy who, ironically enough, is Jarrett Stidham's cousin, but he's the number 2 rated quarterback that Baylor signed in the last, since Jarrett Stidham, and then the last decade plus. And he has all the tools. He's big, pretty mobile. You don't really expect that from a Mike Leach quarterback, but if something breaks down, he can go and make plays with his feet. He obviously has that weight at 6'4", about 215 pounds. And he can throw it all over the yard. Mike Leach doesn't sign a quarterback that can't throw it. and he's a guy that has a baseball background as well, but his entire repertoire of tools is just impressive. And you want a guy that wants to come in and compete, and they're going to have a guy that's going to come in and compete and try to win the job for next fall. But don't just discount Blake Shapen either. He has a lot of growth to do, a lot of growing to do, I should say. And I expect those guys to push each other a lot, and potentially one more guy this spring as well if they can get him on campus.
Colt, with all the those who left the transfer portal, whatever, and some, of course, are headed to the next level, and good luck with all of them. But last year, everything was kind of held intact. And obviously, coming off 12-2, the best single season in Baylor history, the Big 12, the Sugar Bowl, et cetera. Was that why there wasn't much movement, or is there just something else besides the fact they're coming off a bad year?
I think that you look at the portal and the way that coaches are going to have to learn to use it to strengthen their programs. And I think a great way to look at what Baylor's going to do is restricted free agency like you would have in the NFL. And it's saying, okay, we're going to go after guys, in the recruiting cycles that are going to be the foundation. We're not going to lean too heavily on the transfer portal. But as we see in the NFL, there's just times that you just have to go for an overhaul and try to figure out how to add more key pieces than you normally would, because some guys didn't work out. And truthfully, you look at the 2019 and 2020 Baylor recruiting classes, and I mean, you just look up and down. You probably can't get through a list of the entire list without going one or two guys down the list. He's gone. I mean, they're just those programs. I mean, those classes are just in shambles. There's hardly any guys returning, so they were going to have to backfill that in some way. So you move guys around who've transferred out, and you bring guys in, and they had to replenish the roster. And we saw that as an issue last year with the defensive back and the receiver room, where they were very young. They had some older guys, but for the most part, they were very young. And now you're seeing it in other positions. You're seeing that catch up even in the turn. And I'm not going to sit here and place blame on someone that didn't recruit well or guys that didn't pan out, but there was obviously holes in those recruiting cycles that they had to go to the portal with. And I think Dave Aranda realized that, saved spots, and also knew that he was going to have to maneuver some guys in and out of the program, or some guys that accidentally did it to themselves. And you're going to see a completely different looking Baylor team next year at a lot of different spots, a lot of familiar faces, right? But also a lot of new names across the board. And I think they're going for leadership. They're obviously going for talent, and they want to build quickly. And that's one of the things that transfer portal allows them to do.
What is the thing, even with success in the portal, that gives you the most pause going forward that they still may need to address, or even if they have addressed it, will still be a tough build in the offseason?
Yeah, I mean, you look at defensive back. They really wanted to get another corner in. The window's closing for that to happen. Obviously, still have a couple days, but I think that's something they have to address, if not now, in the spring and into the summer. But you really like to have a guy like that on campus as soon as possible. You also look at the offensive line. They brought in the Barrington brothers from BYU, massive pieces to the puzzle. Very older, experienced guys, a lot of maturity with them. They're coming in, but I think you probably want one more. Now, they're not going to get that in the spring. I don't think there's any way they can have it by in a couple days. But you look at maybe the center position. You lose Jacob Gall. Tim Dawn is going to be a redshirt freshman. Do you really want to rely on him next year, as talented as he could be? I mean, he was the number 2 center this year, technically. He probably wouldn't have been that if it would have come down to it. But you want to get a guy in there to possibly play center. And if not, you're probably going to be maneuvering some guys around that you would rather not have to. So I look at the offensive line. I think they probably want one more receiver, even with Keyshawn Jackson coming in from Arkansas, he was the number 1 guy, no matter, whoever you talk to. He is the guy that they wanted to bring in, and they got him, which is massive. But outside of that, I think they're going to want one more. And they're very young at the receiver position. They have some guys who have flashed, but I think you're going to want to get one more. So if I was to go one position, I would definitely say the cornerback or maybe safety position. And I just, if it's not during the spring, hopefully some guys emerge in the spring, but I think you'll definitely see it during the summer.
How surprised were you by the Squirrel Williams decision, whether it was prodded or not, the fact that they're going to be without him next year, and obviously Justin Johnson's departure to Texas Tech? I know that there was some background to that, but what kind of a blow do you think that is? And yeah, just your thoughts on Squirrel's career and Waco being over.
Yeah, let's start with Squirrel. I mean, I think you look at that and how long he had been around. I think that the coaching staff was going to do, if they could keep him on the roster, I think they were going to do it. Like you talk about leadership, a guy who's been through it all, who can lead on and off the field, who has led on and off the field. It was Squirrel Williams, and I think that when they made that decision, if it was whenever those conversations were had, I think the coaching staff was not thrilled about having to do that one way or the other. If it was Squirrel's decision in regards to guys coming on campus, and he just thought he was fitting better somewhere else, or if it was the staff's decision. I mean, I hate that he was never healthy at Baylor, because we all know how talented he was. You saw flashes this year, obviously career high in carries, career high in rushing yards and touchdowns, and just so explosive when given the chance. And I think that I truly, in my personal belief, is that he wanted to come back, and it just was not going to work from a number standpoint, because they needed scholarships and they needed to make it work. And then looking at Juice Johnson, I mean, he's a guy that Joey McGuire wanted to take last year. They lose their receivers coach and passing game coordinator, and obviously they created a new position for him as the assistant head coach. They gave him 3 titles, which is nuts to me, but they gave him 3 titles and probably quite a bit of money. I think Baylor's willing to do a lot, but probably not that much. And, I think everyone wants to cling on to recruiters, and they want to, culture guys and energy guys, et cetera. But I think that some of that stuff is replaceable. I think what Juice Johnson, what's going to be tough to replace is his relationships with the running backs in that room. And you want someone to come in that can develop those relationships quickly. With the transfer portal, you never know. It's not something I'm worried about right now, but relationships are great. You need those, and especially you preach person over player, and you want someone in there to have that, to be able to replace that. And one thing that's great right now is that Dave Aranda's gone through these coaching searches, especially on the offensive skill position searches over the last few years, and he's interviewed a lot of people, and I think that expedites his position. He probably knows who he wants to get at that position, and I think you'll see it pretty quick. Not that it's really important for the late signing period, because you don't have the bulk of your guys signing, but getting into the spring, getting the winter workouts, letting those running backs get familiar with him is a key part to getting him, whoever it might be, in position to do those things.
Colt, so let's say that there's a roster spot left, maybe 2. If someone is going to be a part of that this semester, school starts tomorrow, what is the drop-dead timeline of it being too late?
Well, they got to get in the portal by Wednesday, and so you have the portal by Wednesday, and then making a decision. Classes start tomorrow at Baylor, so the timeline. I mean, we're in the final. We're in the 12th hour at this point.
Okay.
So if something's going to happen, it's going to happen. And if someone goes in the, I don't know if they technically go in the portal after Wednesday and they just can't do anything into the spring. But whatever the case is, Baylor's starting school. You can't get in too late into the school. And I think if Baylor's going to make something happen, it's going to happen within the next 24 hours, and obviously before the end of tomorrow night. That we'll hear something one way or another on a new addition. And there's, like you said, there's 2 spots. They really want a quarterback, a third quarterback for the spring, and they really want potentially a defensive back, maybe a receiver, but probably a defensive back at this point.
Colt, thank you very much. Great stuff. Colt Barber, watching how the roster boils, so to speak, simmering with the TJ Franklin news, and of course Gabe Hall, Bryson Jackson on the clock right now, and then also a note or 2 about the roster itself and the Sawyer Robertson pickup from a week ago. It will be interesting, but they have